Hi, I'm Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia and co-founder of Wikia.
Hi, thanks for doing the interview with me. So take us back to the very first day when sort of Wikipedia launched and tell us how that process transpired.
So we had been working on Nupedia at that time for about a year and had not had very much success. It was a very frustrating and slow process. And basically, an employee, Jeremy Rosenfeld, had shown me the wiki software in mid-December, and then someone else had showed Larry Sanger, I don't know when exactly, but just before then, and we discussed it and decided to try out the wiki. So I went and I found usemod wiki, which was a Perl script, very easy to install, open source, wiki software package, and I just downloaded it and installed it, and we were off to the races.
So did you have the Wikipedia domain name at that point?
I am unsure. I don't know off the top of my head. It was certainly within a couple of days. I don't remember if we had it from that January 15th or not. I assume I could look that up. But the main thing was it was moved to the Wikipedia domain name very, very, very quickly.
So you put it up and you make some edits, and then who were the next edits of people that you didn't know?
The edits by people we didn't know?
Yeah.
So probably the first edits would have been from people who are in the Nupedia community. And so some of those people would have been simply lurkers on the mailing list or not, particularly active. And we wouldn't necessarily know who they were. But pretty quickly people came and found us through the search engines or what have you. I don't know where they came from. You know how the internet is. People show up. But that would have been also in the first few days. I would say within the first couple of weeks we would see some edits and not necessarily know for sure who they were.
So you put up it as an experiment. You broadcast it to the Nupedia list. People start coming in. Were you tracking? What were you tracking at this point? Were you tracking users? Were you tracking edits?
Well, I mean, at this point in time, I would say, I was looking directly at the server access logs just to see how people were using it, what people were doing. But I think probably checking recent changes, so seeing what people were editing and just looking at all the work that people were doing was really the more primary way we had of looking at things.
When was the first time you actually tried to do any kind of promotion besides sending it to the Nupedia list? Did you immediately start sending it to other lists or promote it in any particular way?
I would say no. I don't remember exactly. We had already gotten a fair amount of attention for the Nupedia project, even though it wasn't very successful. We had a lot of people signed up who were interested in it. So as a community, we were already established, as a group of people who were really keen to make an encyclopedia. But yeah, in terms of promotion, no, we didn't really do a lot of promotion.
Did the
Certainly
numbers,
wasn't a priority.
was that not a priority because you were just, things were happening on its own?
Yeah, I would probably say that. We already had a community. We were really just focused on the work. We weren't really thinking at that time of how to make a super popular website. That wasn't really, we weren't opposed to it, but that, it was really more focusing on how do we write an encyclopedia.
So as fast forward a few months, would you say that the growth just kept going linearly up, steadily increasing, or was there an initial sort of spike?
I would say it always grew at I wouldn't say linear. I would say exponential, which doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. So,
That's
in
right.
other
Most
words,
people think power law is exponential, but it's not, is what you're
right, or
referring
they
to,
think
right?
geometric. And when they say exponential, it's like a magic word that means explosive. But no, what I mean by it is, it was basically steady growth in percentage terms. And in particular, I will say we did see some pickup after September 11th. I remember that quite well, that after September 11th, there was a lot of people there were a lot of people on the internet who were searching for various things related to 9/11, and we were pretty quickly a fairly comprehensive source for some fairly obscure information. So, for example, who was the architect who designed the World Trade Center? Well, that was a topic of keen interest. Maybe not, in the top 1,000 searches, but it was still suddenly of interest, and we had pretty much the only decent page about that would basically talk about who was this architect, when was the building designed, all that sort of thing. So one of the things that we did do in that same general time frame, and again, I don't remember the exact specifics, but I used to go through the server logs and figure out where was Google sending traffic, and not just Google, but Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, but even back then Google was the most important. And basically I would publish lists on the wiki called What Google Likes to show people, in the community who are interested in writing things that were popular, okay, well, these are the kinds of things that when we write these things, Google likes them. And so that gave people ideas. They would see like, oh, look, Google's very interested in presidents, and we only have 4 of the presidents. Let's make a list of all the U.S. presidents and go through and fill those in. Those will get traffic from Google. So things like that we used to do quite a bit of.
So drill on that in a minute for a moment. So at that point, around September 11th, were you, besides the server logs, did you have any kind of like analytics on it where you knew that most of the people were coming from Google, or what percentage that was?
Well, yeah, I mean, just in terms of doing it by hand, I mean, we weren't really running analytics software or anything like that. It was basically just paying close attention. I mean, you got to remember this was pretty low traffic. So, when we had 500 pages, it wasn't that hard to sort of do a very quick and dirty analysis on the server logs to see, okay, well, of all the pages, of all the clicks that we're getting that come from Google, which ones are the most popular? Questions like that were pretty easy to look at.
So putting up pages to get more, search traffic, does that imply that the community itself was focused or interested in including yourself in growing it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The community was very interested in growing it, but also interested in writing something that people would enjoy. So it wasn't, they weren't focused on growth in the same way or for the same reasons that a typical .com would be, but it was more about saying, hey, we want more people to contribute and we want more people to enjoy what we're working on here, so we should write things that people will find interesting.
So it seems that at the other hand, you didn't do that much promotion. Is there a reason for that if you also wanted to grow it? Or by this point, were you doing promotion too?
Well, we never had any money for promotion, so the only thing we could do is talk to people, and some people in the community would talk about outreach and how do we find more people to edit and things like that. But in terms of organized, or the kinds of activities people would think of as promotion, no, we didn't really do any of that.
Were you trying to assess or track whether new users were coming in through word of mouth or generally originating from a search engine query and then turned into editors?
I can say I was interested in the question, but I had no means of answering it. So, especially when we're talking about the very early days, you have to remember this is something that it was really seat of the pants. It was really kind of an intuitive approach and really just trying to say, okay, well, what, get up every day and say, well, what looks like a fun thing to do to try to see if this thing can grow.
So despite, that you still kept growing, doubling about the same amount of time is what you're saying, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so as it got bigger, was there a point in time when the logs were bigger, when you could run more analytics, where some of the stuff seemed to make more sense?
You would think so, but we've never been very good at doing anything like that. I don't oppose the practice, but we've never been very good at doing any kind of analytics of any kind.
So there was never really a point, you'd say, where traffic plateaued and then it picked up again, or it was really just sort of steady from the get-go in this exponential track. Is that fair?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there were different events and different times, so especially back then, we could see an impact of the school year. When the college kids came back or whoever was coming back to school in the fall, we would see a traffic surge in the first few years, and then certain things, press coverage, if we got slash dotted back in the old days, that made a difference. There was never any plateau or change of strategy or anything like that.
Do you think that it was just the right time for Wikipedia? That basically what you're saying is you didn't have to do any promotion. By your great idea was coming up with the idea, and then it sort of, I mean, you had to manage it obviously, and you did that very, very well. But it sort of grew on its own because it was such a compelling idea. Would you say that's fair?
No. What I would say is that what made it grow was day-to-day execution every single day.
And so you think that if, and this maybe gets to my next question, if other wikis sometimes succeed and sometimes fail, you think that the reason why they do and why Wikipedia succeeded and other wikis fail is the management and the day-to-day execution?
I would say that I have known of cases where, somebody has created a wiki that was not a very interesting idea, or an interesting idea but only appealed to a small number of people, and never really got anywhere with it because it just didn't have much appeal to people. On the other hand, I've seen people start wikis that they were in the right place at the right time, and the wiki just suddenly attracted an audience, and they didn't really do anything, and it just kept growing. But neither of those is the normal case. Normally, it is about day-to-day execution. It's about keeping an eye on the newcomers to the wiki and meeting them and greeting them and making friends with them and encouraging people and coaching people. It's about building community, which doesn't happen automatically. And if the founder of the wiki doesn't do it, somebody's got to do it, or it doesn't get done.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of Wikipedia then. What kind of things were you doing to foster that community in that first year on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, we had very active mailing lists. We had, an already existing community. And so we just continued the conversation, and a lot of practices developed in the first year. Things like, if somebody new comes in, we would greet them and talk to them and make sure that they were oriented and, that they understood the mission and what we're trying to accomplish.
So
it's all very old-fashioned in a certain sense.
Would you literally send them personal emails or?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so you'd say hi, thanks for checking this out and editing, welcome, this is what we're all about, that kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. And so at a certain point, right, you have a bigger community where your personal entrees make less of an impact. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, of course, right. And so in order to build a community and to have those things transmitted on a scalable way, it's about building up certain values in the community, values of being friendly, of being open, of wanting to bring new people into the community. Those things are really, really important because one person can't do it all, obviously.
So when did that sort of inflection point happen for Wikipedia where you sort of stopped doing these personal emails because it became too big where it wasn't going to have much of an impact?
Well, I still do it every day. So
okay, that's good.
I don't know. I don't think there was any simple answer to that. Lots of people were involved. Even more people are involved today. So, I can't think of a way to characterize any particular point.
So it was more that instead of stopping that, you involved more people in it. Was that
right?
Accurate?
Exactly.
And so today there's just more and more people, but they're still trying to greet new users in a similar fashion.
Yeah, exactly.
So it keeps growing. Do you have any sense now for how much new users come in through search engines, or you still have no particular way to track that?
There are probably other people who have a better idea of that than I do. I mean, people are starting to look at those kinds of things now. But I mean, we do know that of the traffic at Wikipedia, something like 60 to 70% comes from search engines. That's just talking about traffic in general. In terms of new editors and where they come from, I don't think we really have a good sense of that at all.
Were there any times where this, so it seems like you got SEO kind of traffic right from the beginning, is that right?
Yeah, definitely.
Were there any times when did that also steadily increase at the same sort of rate? Were there ever any times where it suddenly dropped for some reason or increased for some other reason? Not as like an event like September 11th, but because they were just ranking things differently?
Yeah, I mean, at various times we had seen an impact on traffic due to Google, whatever the mysteries of Google are at times. But we never really did anything about it. We just stuck to making a great website and figured they would figure themselves out eventually.
So they never or any other search engines never tried to just reach out to you early on and say, we realize you're building this thing, we want to do a tighter integration or anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, there was a period of time when because everything in Wikipedia is open source, there was a period of time where there were all of these clones of Wikipedia. They were copying all of our content and slapping some ads on it. And they were kind of being a problem in the Google search results because sometimes they would be stale and out of date and so on like that. So I did have one phone call. Someone from Google called from the quality team at Google, and they were looking at this and they were realizing it was a problem, and they were basically just trying to understand better who we were and what we were doing. And I believe what they did, that was when they sort of implemented that they look at the recent changes page, and they basically started being able to think about if this page is a copy of that one, which is the freshest, which one's updated the most often, and things like that, so that they could basically algorithmically weed out sites that were just copying other sites. And that helped a lot.
So can we move to Wikia?
Yep.
So Wikia, you started in 2004, right?
That's right.
And so take us to that launch day. How did that look, and as compared to Wikipedia?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure I even remember a particular launch day. We launched it. Gosh, we should probably talk to Angela. She's much smarter and better at remembering things than I am. But in the beginning, Angela and I just started setting up some wikis for people, and it was fairly ad hoc. In the early days, we didn't have a big system for doing everything. But we realized that there was some demand for people wanted to start wikis, and we could do that for them.
Was there any ones in particular that you went live with initially that already had existing communities, or was it all from scratch again?
It was pretty much from scratch, but Angela's always been really great about finding wikis that need some help and showing them how we can help them. And so, especially in the early days, a lot of people had downloaded the MediaWiki software and gotten started, but they realized that actually managing a server isn't that fun and isn't really what they wanted to do. They wanted to work on their wiki. And so they would move over to our service rather than stay where they were. So we did a fair amount of that, particularly in the early days. Later on, we did some acquisitions for some bigger wikis that had already become successful. So we did that, and some of those were really hiring acquisitions. In other words, we saw a great wiki founder, somebody who was doing a really great job of managing the community. I mean, the example I have in mind is our Muppets wiki, where we hired the guy because he's really good and still works for us today. So a lot of different ways that we've looked at growth at Wikia.
So does the Wikia growth, did it have the same pattern as Wikipedia?
So yeah, I mean, we have these charts that show that the growth follows the same kind of pattern, a little slower than Wikipedia. So in the same number of months since launch, the time it took us to get to 600 million page views. That's the time it took Wikipedia to get to 800 million page views. So a little slower, but the curve looks very, very similar.
And I assume the sort of the traffic sources look very similar as well, coming from search engines, etc.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you try to when you started these new wikis for Wikia, did you try to impart? Did you yourself do some of the community management, or did you just try to impart that to the other wiki managers? How did that work?
You mean at Wikia?
Yeah. Yep.
For the most part at Wikia, that I have not been directly involved in community management in the same way that I have been traditionally at Wikipedia. Angela had a huge part in that in the early days, and now we have a community team, who have been, trained by Angela and other people on staff, Sansei in particular, and most of them have already, extensive wiki experience before they're hired at Wikipedia or at Wikia.
So, people obviously try to compare the two. How much, if any, do you feel, the Wikipedia name brought to the traffic of Wikia, like on day one? Any?
Probably not so much. I think, my ability to go out and promote it and to say things to the press that they care about obviously helped a lot. There's definitely, it was easier for me to start it because I already had a prior success. And the same thing was true, when I went to do fundraising and talking to venture capitalists. It was pretty easy to talk to venture capitalists because they said, oh, wow, Wikipedia is amazing. Let's give you some money. What can you do next?
So I could totally see the fundraising side, but I'm wondering more about the press side, because oftentimes, be able to get press, you'll get a lot of users, but they won't convert, And so I'm wondering if that sort of happened to Wikia. You were able to get a lot of press, but, a lot of the users bounced, and then you went on the same slow, steady growth like at Wikipedia.
No, not really. I would say we got a lot of press, and we've been able to capitalize on that press.
So the press really did turn into new wikis, and some of those wikis really took off?
Yeah, without question.
So in that sense, the promotion side of Wikia definitely helped its growth, you'd say?
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you do that yourself? Did you have a PR firm that you hired to help you?
We've always worked with a PR firm or an outside person, which is what we have now. But it's mostly, for the most part, what we've relied on them for is to help manage all the incoming press that we get. So we get tons and tons of incoming press inquiries all the time, and it's really a matter of just triaging that and figuring out which ones are worth doing, and what are we telling people at this time? What's the interesting thing that people want to know about?
So so you've done a ton of press. So let's just ask a couple questions about that. So when you first started out at Wikipedia, I imagine you wanted to get press, and you had no real way of doing it. Is that fair? From those days, did you learn anything in particular about trying to get press when people aren't really listening to you?
Not really. I mean, the main thing is from day one, I've always been, as extremely available to the press as I can make myself. And I knew that was important from day one. But yes, it is true. In the early days, there wasn't anything that we did for outreach to the press. But, if Slashdot called, we answered the phone, and made sure to answer all their questions and things like that. So, it's not, we've never been much good at doing outbound sort of generating stories, and I'm skeptical as to whether or not you can do that, other than having a big picture vision that people think is interesting. But we've always been really good at incoming press inquiries. We're very responsive.
So on the other side of press lesson learned, after having done so much press, what can you sort of advice give to people who are on the side of your side of the interviews?
Well, I mean, one of the things to understand is that the press will get the story wrong, and even the best press will get the story wrong, and that's not necessarily their fault. And you may get frustrated with them at times, but it's just the fact of life. And you have to think about when you're constructing a message, knowing that it's going to be presented incorrectly. Just try and make sure it doesn't go too far off track. So keep your message very, very simple. Repeat it basically 10 times a day, and eventually something vaguely similar to the truth will make its way to the public consciousness.
So it is their fault, right? It just we can understand why they're getting it wrong because they have a deadline pressure or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I wouldn't even want to say the word fault. I mean, I think it's just part of the human dilemma of communication, that people bring in their own assumptions to a conversation, and they get out of it what they were looking to get out of it. And even the best journalist who may fight those instincts still is a human being, and so it's just the way things are, really.
Have you at Wikia, and I doubt you did at Wikipedia, done any kind of paid advertising or other types of promotion?
No, I mean, our customers have spent more on advertising than we have, promoting their own wikis that they're interested in. But yeah, no, we've never done that.
Okay, so I think those are all my basic questions about Wikipedia and Wikia.
Cool.
Do you have more advice or in general advice for people starting out and wanting to get traction, given that you've had 2 successes?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing is, and I touched on this a little bit, is make sure that you're and I'm really talking about, in this context, I'm talking about the internet and getting traction as a website. But I actually think the advice is probably applicable more broadly, and it's probably the oldest and most simplest advice in marketing an idea is make sure that the idea is simple. If you can't really explain what you're doing in 1 or 2 sentences, you're going to have a really, really hard time communicating your message because of all of the problems. First of all, when you're starting out, you won't get that much press, so you have to make every opportunity, really shine. And then additionally, the communication problem. I said, if you go to a reporter and you've got some very complicated story that has 18 different parts to it, they're not going to be able to make heads or tails of it, and they're going to end up saying something that's nothing like what you wanted. Whereas if you just hammer away on a very simple vision, here's what we're trying to do, here's why we're doing it, then you have at least a chance that the storyline that's out there in the public eye is the one that you want. And then that story has to be something that people care about. They have to say, oh, okay, like, Amazon, I can go there and buy books. I get it, right? I go on there and I type in stuff, and then I click on the order and I put in my credit card and they send me books. Simple. I understand this business. Either I want to be a customer or I don't, but it's not complicated. Whereas, lots of things, you go to the website and you're like, what the hell is this exactly? So I think that's probably my main advice is, keep the vision simple.
So with that in mind, did you change your message about Wikipedia and or Wikia over the years that you were trying to deliver?
No, not really. I mean, the core idea of a free encyclopedia for everyone was there from the very beginning, and it's one reason we got traction in the early days is that when people heard about it, they would say, "Oh, cool!" And people, the community that understood us the best was the free software community, the open source software. So we would say, it's a freely licensed encyclopedia written by thousands of volunteers in many languages, and people would go, "Boom, gotcha! I know what this is. I get it." A website anyone can edit. Simple. I know what that means. I don't understand how could that possibly work, but at least I know what it's about, and I'm ready to sort of get started and begin to learn about it. So I think that's one of the reasons this was all successful was that it was very simple from the beginning.
So is there any sort of, at the beginning of Wikipedia, any kind of story or secret that is just unknown that you've been wanting to tell that no one's asked you about?
Not really. It's I don't know. There's many stories and so on, but yeah, not really. Not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right, super. Thanks.